Good morning, everyone. I'm Rob Spurko. I'm the co-president of Foothills Unitarian Universalist Fellowship.
Good morning. My name is Shalane Curd. I'm a member of the Oak Ridge Unitarian Universalist Church Board, and we'd like to welcome you today to today's service. Whether you're here today for the first time or back for the first time in a long time, we hope your time with us will be rejuvenating and fulfilling. Before service starts, we have a couple of brief announcements. First, please consider joining the ORUUC Facebook group. It's a great place to meet people and the way we stay connected throughout the week. Second, after service, many of us go to other smaller groups for a second hour of worship. You're welcome to attend any group listed on the slide when the service ends, but we particularly invite you to stay right here in this Zoom room for a session we called Inquirers. Inquirers is a great place for people coming into the community to get to know one another and to learn more about the congregation and Unitarian Universalism. Finally, for almost 15 years, every week, our congregation sends half the offering out the door in support of a mission or ministry in our local area. For the month of November, the Split the Plate recipient is the Free Medical Clinic. Our first UU principle is the inherent worth and dignity of everyone. The Free Medical Clinic offers no-charge primary medical services to low-income and uninsured residents of Anderson, Roane, and Morgan counties. Because the clinic serves people who do not have health insurance or cannot afford to pay, their services can sometimes mean the difference between life and death. Since 2010, the Free Medical Clinic has provided over 40,000 patient visits. But because they are primarily a volunteer organization, they rely on donations from individuals, churches, groups, etc. When the offering comes around, we ask that you consider giving as generously as you're able. Once again, thanks for joining us today and welcome. We hope today is the start of something beautiful.
Good morning. This is Rob Spurko. Good morning. This is Rob Spurko. I'm the co-president of the board at Foothills Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. Sorry, I popped in early, missed my cue there. I just want to welcome everybody from Foothills here. Anybody who's from Blount County or interested, we have a visitor's card, which you can fill out if you want more information and receive our emails. I'm popping the link in the chat if you want to click on that. We're delighted to be hosting or to be part of another joint worship service between us and Oak Ridge this morning. And it's a beautiful day with beautiful music so far. And I just want to invite you to our coffee hour afterwards. You'll see the Zoom meeting ID there on the slide. It'll also be on a slide at the end of the worship service in case you can't remember an 11-digit number for an hour. But if you want to take that down now, you can. And also, our Share the Plate this month is Family Promise of Blount County. You may have remembered that we've done it recently. We're doubling up with Family Promise. They normally provide transitional housing for homeless families. Their resources have been constrained because of the pandemic, and they normally house them in churches on a rotating basis, and they are unable to do that at present. So they're having to find transitional housing in the community and pay for that. So your contributions will be greatly appreciated towards that. Thanks again for coming this morning. We've got a great service ahead of us. Thank you and be well, friends.
On our way through the dark wood, we look around us to acknowledge the kingdom, the family that has always been and is already right here with us. Sojourners in the dark wood do not go it alone, but are blessed with the presence of others who help us see, reflect with us, and discover together with us the riches of a life lived with intention.
And when the sky is swept of walls, and keeps but gentle moon and stars, that peaceful sky, that harmless air, how sweet the darkness there.
These are the words of Andrew Pakula. In sightless night, terrors draw near, nameless fears of talon and tooth, hopelessness yawns before us, an abyss. Alone and unknown in the gloom, longing for the dawn, O sacred flame, blaze forth. Wisdom brought to life, guide us. With the light of hope, the warmth of love, the beacon of purpose and meaning, because we are all afraid of the dark. Let there be light. Now, let us sing together in our own places, hymn number 338, I Seek the Spirit of a Child.
Good morning. We come to the time in our service where each of us is invited to take stock of our own lives. What is alive in you today? What joys, sorrows, convictions, hopes, fears? Let us bring our full selves to this hour and create our worship service together. Today's altar building has a special element. November 20th is the annual Transgender Day of Remembrance. From last October through this September, 47 precious people have died due to violence against them because they were transgender people. We must grieve that. We must remember. And so as we build our altar, as we bring our meaning today, I invite you especially to bring that grief, perhaps that anger about the precarious nature of the lives of people simply because they are transgender people. We have three ways that we generally build our altar as we call this meaning-bringing time. You may light a candle and hold it up to your camera so that we can see you on the screen. You can go down to the chat box and write a word or a short phrase that just expresses where you are today, expresses your you-ness, what you bring, what this means to you. And finally, there is a prayer that will follow this altar building time. And you can email your prayer requests. It's on the screen, oruuc.community.prayers. That way we will lift up what you want shared in the community prayer that will follow. And that prayer will conclude today with seeing on our screen the names of the transgender people we are remembering in 2020. I invite you now into building our altar.
I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. Breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out.
I invite you to breathe in and breathe out a full, deep breath. I invite you to settle in your chair, feel your feet held by the floor or ground beneath you. Take your shoulders and roll them forward and up and back, and just settle down into this place where you are, all of us present together. Let your eyes close or your gaze soften, and just notice that breath, that giving and receiving. Just follow that and let that breath take you inward. Breathe in and breathe out. O Spirit of life, holy oneness of all, we invite your presence in our lives. And we ask these prayers of this, our community. We ask continued prayers and offer continued prayers for Sam Meyer. Sam is currently on ICU with COVID, and we ask that Sam be held in tender, loving care, and also his loving parents, Beth and Gina and Harry. Their struggle with this very difficult disease is so real, and it has brought it all so close to home for this community. May Beth and Gina, our beloved members, know that they are held in love. And may we come to this hour realizing that their struggle is the struggle of so many people all over the world, separated by this disease and grieving from the losses and the challenges of this disease. Oh, Sam, we are with you. And Beth and Gina, we are with you. And Harry, Sam's dad. We also have one who says, prayers please for all who struggle with the loss of a loved one. Grief can seem endless and heavy. May all in the midst of the grieving journey be upheld by the beauty of the universe, upheld by friendship, and by the knowledge and memory of the gift of their relationship with their loved one. O Spirit of life, hold those who are grieving, and may we hold those among us who are grieving, where it is not to be shared alone, and it is part of all life. We hold in special care this day all who are grieving. We ask for healing prayers and positive thoughts to loved ones, to those living in full care facilities, those in quarantine, and still getting COVID. This person says, my mother is 92, diagnosed positive this week. At this time, she is holding her own. And so another story of the horrific costs of this disease. May we hold in loving care this person, her mother, and all who are dealing with COVID. And we have prayers from one for her grandmother. that her final days will be joyful and free of pain, and prayers that this person will not catch COVID when visiting her grandmother or pass it on to her partner and his parents. And so we have again the calls of our love of one another, juxtaposed by this disease which separates us. May we each and may we all find our way through this narrow gate of loving and needing to hold and not being able to. O Spirit of life, we call to mind also those whose lives have been lost to violence against them as transgender people. May our hearts hold all who are grieving this loss of someone they love dearly, who has left them for a horrific reason, left them due to hate and misunderstanding and the broken world in which we live. We will now see the names. I invite you to read these names to yourselves as we honor and remember and grieve for Transgender Day of Remembrance.
Breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out.
Thank you for that remembrance of those for whom I'm building my altar this week. Friends, we are in a time of great possibility. We are at a great turning. And thus it is up to us to determine which of the possibilities ahead of us becomes reality through who we listen to, through who we lift up, through who we side with in love. As we give our offering, let us remember that it's our generosity that help determine possibilities for many in our communities, the possibilities of life and abundance and being held in love. Thank you for your generosity.
when sorrow heals my soul,
and burdens make me strong.
though troubles wait at every turn, I know I can go on, I can go on. My sin is in my heart, my neighbor in my song. The troubles wait at every turn. I know I can go on,
And though the journey is long,
the destination is near. The troubles wait at every turn. I know I can go on, I can go on. The troubles wait at every turn. I know I can go on.
Thank you for your generosity. Thank you for your love. Thank you for your kindness. If those in FOOF can join me with me in your words as we affirm these offerings with our covenant. Love is the spirit of this fellowship, and service is its blessing. To dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. This is our great covenant.
Rooted in love, we covenant, together in peace, to face conflict with compassion, to see strength in diversity, to share laughter and tears, to honor the profound in each of us. With purpose and passion, we care for one another and grow together, rooted in love.
Good morning, everyone. One of the hallmarks of the Oak Ridge UU Church community is collaboration. We do nothing alone. We are in it together, and that has over the years increasingly been true in our worship services as well. With ways of participating and joining together. This has been a special challenge in the time of technology required of us in the pandemic. But as you heard from the singing, we've been figuring out the ways to collaborate. Today, we're going to experiment with seeing about bringing a little bit of collaboration into the storytelling, and I'm going to need your help. So this is a story that is at least 800 years old from Germany, called the Bremen Town Musicians. And what I'm going to need to ask you to do is, to the extent that you're willing, choose whether you are a donkey, a dog, a cat, or a rooster, Now, maybe you've been reflecting on this question for a very long time, or maybe it's a new question for you. But the invitation now is that Gina Grubb is going to make it possible in just a moment for you to unmute yourself if you'd like. And we're going to practice making the sounds, all of us different voices of either a donkey, a dog, a cat, or a rooster. We're going to practice now, and then in the middle of the story, I'm going to give you the cue, and it'll be time to make that symphony, that cacophony again. So let's try it. I think, is it possible now for everybody to unmute themselves? Donkey, dog, cat, or rooster? Let's hear it. Let's hear your song.
Yeah.
Beautiful. That is music to my ears. Okay, so we're ready for the time in the story where that comes up. Here's the story. Once upon a time, there was a very old donkey. He had lived on a farm for many years and had carried heavy loads from here to there for as long as he could remember. But as he got older, he got less able to carry those heavy loads. And he heard the word around the barnyard that the farmer was planning to get rid of him, to send him on. And he didn't like the sound of this very much. So he decided that before the farmer could make any decisions about him, he, the donkey, was going to take off and go to Bremen. Now, he sounded, he heard that Bremen was a place where people could be their true selves, a place of freedom that welcomed people just as they were, and even donkeys as well. So he took off, left that farm, and went on down the road. He hadn't gotten very far along, indeed, when he saw that there was a dog lying in the road. This was an old hound dog. This dog, too, had lived with a human family for a very long time. It helped them with hunting. It helped them watch out for people, shady characters on the edge of their farm. But now this old hound lying in the road was too old for his family. And he had also heard word around the barnyard that the people who lived there were thinking about getting rid of him as well. So this old hound dog said, well, I'm going to join you, donkey, and we're going to go to the town of Bremen. They kept on going down the road, and don't you know that they came upon a cat in the very same condition. This cat in earlier days, it had sharp claws and quickness, able to catch mice and to help out with all of what's needed around the farm where this cat lived. But no longer. Time had dulled her eyesight, and now it was time for her to move on. She joined that group too. So now it was the donkey, the dog, and the cat all moving down the road toward the town of Bremen. And don't you know that they came upon right in the road an old rooster, and this rooster said the very same thing. My people don't think I'm of any use anymore. I'm going to join you on the road to Bremen. Well, these four new friends, unlikely companions as they were to each other, kept on going down the road until evening fell, and they saw off on the side of the road a small cottage that was lit from inside. Curious, they got closer, and sure enough, there appeared to be a fire that they could see through the window, and it looked so warm, and they could smell soup that was bubbling, and the smell wafted outside to the yard where they were. Oh, they were so excited. But then as they drew closer, they saw that there were some people at the table who were counting a big sack of gold coins. And it turned out that these were robbers. These people had just been to the town of Bremen and robbed shops and robbed households and taken all of their money. And here they were counting all their gold coins. Well, this made the animals very nervous for a moment at first, but then they decided what they were going to do. The donkey stood by the window, and the hound dog climbed up on top of the donkey. The cat made her way up on top of the dog, and the rooster, using the strength that he had, got up and rested on top of the cat. There they were, donkey, dog, cat, rooster, one on top of the other. And they decided that they were going to use their musical skills to set up an uproar outside the house of robbers and just see what would happen. So this is the part of the story where we're going to need to hear exactly what those robbers in the house heard on that evening. I'm going to ask you all to unmute yourselves and let's let it rip. As you can imagine, and perhaps as you have just experienced, it was terrifying. It was a terrifying noise. The robbers didn't know where to go. They jumped up from the table, they ran into each other, and then ran out of the house, all through a different door and into the woods. Well, the animals went into the cottage and they found that it was, in fact, very warm there by the fire and that the soup was just delicious. Now, and then they laid down and went to bed to go to sleep. Now, outside, the robbers collected themselves about half a mile from the house, and they said, well, we don't know what that was, but we can't leave all that gold sitting there in the house. And so they crept back, and perhaps the bravest of the robbers said, I will go in to the house. And the robber looked through the windows and saw what looked like the burning embers of coal from the warm fire that night. In fact, it was the glint from the eyes of the cat. The robber went into the door, crept in the dark, and in just a moment came running, screaming, tearing back out to the other robbers and said, run, run, run. Well, they ran about 3 miles down the road without stopping. And when they were all down the road where they felt they were safe, the robber said to the others, we can never go back there again. That place is haunted. Don't you know, as soon as I got in there, I was set upon and I was scratched by a terrible witch. And of course, we know that this was just the cat. And then he said, and then I was pounded on by hammers. And of course, we know that this was the donkey hooves kicking the robber. And then there was a terrible monster that bit me on the ankles and bit me on the legs. And of course, we know that this was the old hound dog. And worst of all, throughout it all, said the robber, there was the howling of demons that came from everywhere. And of course, we know that this was just the rooster. The robbers were never heard from again. And the 4 Bremen town musicians never actually made it to Bremen, but instead created a nice life for themselves there in the cottage, enjoying the music that they made every evening, caterwauling, barking, meowing, and crowing, and enjoying it all and each other for the rest of their days. That's the story for today.
Thank you, Jake. For those of you that don't know me, I am Christine Rader. I am the Director of Faith Formation here at ORUUC, and we have a special tradition following the story. Members of our congregation, those seated in the center aisle, would stand up, raise their arms, grab hands, and form an arch. And then the children would walk through the arch on their way out to the playground. And on a day like today, they probably would have been running because that was a fun story told by Jake. So I was always a little bit nervous, but it was a nice impediment to slow them down. But we continue this in our virtual world. You can raise your arms nice and high. You can make an arch like this to welcome them into your hearts. However you do it, just remember this blessing for our children.
Beneath our arms we shelter you. You warm our hearts as you pass through. May all anoint you as you go to help you learn and help you grow.
Originating as a birthday celebration, Santa Barbara, California's Summer Solstice Parade began in 1974. And this parade was created for my friend, Michael Gonzalez, a Santa Barbara resident who was a mime and an artist. We used to have these parades for him for his birthday. The crowd is now the largest single day event in Santa Barbara County, attracting worldwide crowds of 100,000 people or more. The following is an essay I wrote in 1979 when the parade attracted just a few hundred people after meeting with Michael and the gang of artist misfits, of which I was a part. And in that year, the idea was to hold a huge rally in the courtyard of the Santa Barbara City Hall. Rest in peace, Michael, my friend. May your legacy continue to enrich the world for many more years. In Santa Barbara, there's a group of people called the Mime Caravan. They hold their meetings where they can in the places they happen to be renting at the time. On early Sunday morning, we all met in the shade. Some of us were wearing shirts and shoes. The whole caravan consisted of anywhere from 20 to 50 members, with a core roughly of 15 people. And most of us have, I can't tell about the others. They seem to be professional artists, whatever that means, who subsist on their art and each other's religious dedication. 5 of us met with Michael on Sunday. And under the veranda of what was once a church, we discussed the mechanics of the newest project, a piece about the earth, the spirit, and man, to put it simply. What a waste of energy. Michael, who moves better than he speaks, was communicating his piece to us. There was much talk of energy, connections, space, movements, and sequence. We sat, sometimes asking questions, sometimes offering suggestions, but mostly trying to connect with the nebulous and powerful image in his mind. And we began the process of unraveling this complex image. We, as scientists of art, each with our own special skills and perceptions, dissected his mind, breaking little pieces off of him to reform them into our own shapes, fitting them into the jigsaw of our art structure. And Michael had prepared for us what he called a script to guide us. It was written simply, and put simply, it doesn't do much good to read it aloud. It needs the author to breathe life into it. As the composer of the group, I am to create, according to his image, a song for a tree that is short but echoes time, the sounds of metal and grinding that are loud and threatening, the sound of hypnotic music of high intensity with harmonious tones ringing out like a gamelan orchestra, celebrating the cycle and evolution of life, among other sounds. I will create these aural images with Michael's help, with endless hours in the electronic music studio behind the growling madness of a huge Moog synthesizer, and with the help of whatever spirits there are that echo time and are somewhat hypnotic. At 11:30, I popped up to announce my impending departure into the other reality. I was not alone. We all had to get back into that other space. I intromitted my peregrination vehicle and began a 2-hour journey back to Los Angeles. Now, let's hear Juniper's story.
I was at perhaps the lowest point in my life, suffering a great personal loss. And I found myself out of Knoxville, where I'd been living for several years, back home in Rockwood with my mom, nowhere to go, no one to hold me, or so it felt. And I lingered there for a while in a kind of quiet anguish, a lot of hurt, but also a lot of love that I found with my family, an opportunity to reconnect and to tend to some of my outsideness. It's fitting that we speak of Tidor today. So I'm a trans woman. I feel like there is a misfit quality to most trans people. It's a blessing and a binding. But I was in Roane County and I was carrying this identity in this strange place, stranger in my own hometown. When in the dark woods a way opened, suddenly, a friend of a friend in Knoxville had invited me that I might come and stay at this place called the Hawthorne House. And the Hawthorne House was a collective living type arrangement, you know, full of punks and anarchists and communists and all kinds of fun folks. And I had never really been in a situation like this before. I'd never really done any kind of organizing or activism. I was fairly, you know, left of center, but I wasn't really politically aware at all in any particular way. And so I find myself in this place and there are posters and there's a huge table with all kinds of food that people have been making and sharing. And there was this list on the wall, kind of like a covenant, just a general like consensus-based way that we had agreed to be together. And I was with all kinds of people. I remember two in particular that really stuck out to me. My friend David Hayes, who ran for city council in Knoxville just last year, and the conversations we would have about gender identity and the complicated nature of just being a person in this world and being on the outside and finding ways to leverage power from the outside to affect the world. And my friend Dee Steele, who is a son of labor organizers in West Virginia, found his feet doing anti-mountaintop removal work in West Virginia, found himself at the Hawthorne House himself. And he had been doing a lot of work with people who struggle with addiction. And we would allow people who are struggling with homelessness to come into our house and take a shower. And that kind of radical proximity to outsideness. When I say outsideness, I mean it's a kind of privilege to be on the inside, isn't it? And so we found ourselves on the outside and coming together in a kind of unity, building community, rooted in consensus as much as we could. And that beloved idea of real democracy, which is one of our Unitarian principles. And I found myself there. I will not be the person that I am today, certainly will not be the minister I'm becoming, if I hadn't learned to embrace my own outsideness, to embrace my transness and find what's holy in it, to find that radical love and empowerment that I've been lacking, that had felt ripped away from me in my great loss, like a wind blasting all the leaves off a tree, and I had to grow new leaves. And I don't have to be a part of the inside anymore, or as much. Helping people find ways to leverage their own misfit nature and make a way out of no way. Trailblazing in the dark woods. This is the gift of misfits to me.
ORUUC and Foothills, I dare say, is blessed and enriched by the complexity of so many perspectives and experiences and wisdom. So I'm just appreciating that wealth that we enjoy today. So about a week ago, I got a disappointing email. It was only one sentence. It said, "Unfortunately, in the state of Tennessee, owning a fox is illegal." I'll explain. Somewhere in Minnesota, there's a nonprofit organization that rescues foxes from fur factories. These are foxes who have been bred and raised in these fur factories, so they wouldn't survive in the wild. The organization that rescues them adopts them out through the country to people willing and able to create the conditions where such an animal can thrive. A fenced-in backyard, plenty of food, enough playtime, and so forth. The founder of the organization has made dozens of YouTube videos of herself playing with these foxes, tickling them as they make their high-pitched giggle, romping with them around her backyard, and generally illustrating what a good idea it could be to take one of these foxes into your own life. So at our house, the research began. As I did some research, I got caught up in the fox fever myself. It wasn't initially my idea, but I got caught up in the fever, at least enough to write a letter to the Fox Rescue Organization with a list of questions to aid in our discernment. Then the response: unfortunately, in the state of Tennessee, owning a fox is illegal. We are in a pandemic. Each of us may be losing our bearings in particular and diverse ways. What was settled in these recent months has now become unsettled. What was established has now come undone. So it may be that you've been looking at your own life from a new angle, taking stock of things in a new light. Maybe you haven't considered adopting a fox, but you might be pondering other new decisions and dilemmas that would have been strange to you only 9 months ago. In the weeks since receiving that email saying that fox adoption was out of the question, I've been thinking about what was behind my urge. Like many houses in Oak Ridge, ours backs up to some woods. We see deer every day, and now and then at dawn or dusk catch sight of a fox furtively slipping through the half-light from one place of cover to another. Foxes are the definition of elusiveness. The relationship with them seems to represent something just out of reach. How tempting it is to domesticate them, to make relating to a fox something of daily or ordinary exchange. The urge to tame, to domesticate, to bring down to earth and now into daily view not only applies to our relationship with the natural world and the wildlife in it, but also our theology, our ultimate view of this life. The Jewish scriptures, the Christian New Testament, the Muslim Quran, the Baha'i sacred writings all reference multiple times something about fearing the Lord or the fear of God. Now, love based in fear may not sound like love to you at all. But what I hear in that phrase, fearing God, instead is the quality of reverence and relationship and mystery, more like what 20th century theologian Rudolf Otto called the numinous. The numinous is that's beyond our full knowing, beyond our full naming, beyond our control. To include the numinous in our worldview is to say that no matter our efforts, there will always exist that which is beyond us, beyond our efforts at capture. It is to allow for the majesty of complexity, for the breadth of eternity and the sweep of infinity in our theology and in our spiritual lives. How different is that, the numinous, from so many of our usual efforts at spiritual practice? So often, and especially in a turbulent time when we're stressed beyond measure, what we long for is comfort. What we want is predictability. What we seek is more calm. If the divine is something like a wild fox slipping into the shadows out of our grasp at dawn and at dusk, then what we want is to build a pen in our backyard and put the holy right there in some domesticated sphere where we can look at it head on, even give it a name. Our efforts to domesticate life, to tame what's wild and beyond us is certainly understandable, especially in a time of high anxiety when so much is in flux. But our insistence upon certainty leaves us vulnerable and unpracticed to meeting those moments when the unknowable can't be avoided. Today, as we continue this series along the path through the dark woods, we are here to reflect on the gifts of the misfits, what we receive in relationship and companionship with those who are different from us, those in our lives who explode the settled categories of the domesticated lives we have lived. I've spent this time talking about foxes and God because I think the dynamic when it comes to our companions is not all that different. As we seek to domesticate and rein in what's wild and beyond us in nature and in life for the sake of our comfort and our need to control, we can do the same in relation to others. We can make acceptance of our established categories a precondition to relating to others. We can huddle together in tribes of the like-minded so often that to encounter one who is different from those rigid outlines can almost seem like a threat. This coming week on Friday, many will mark the somber occasion of the Transgender Day of Remembrance by lifting up the names of those beautiful trans siblings of ours who have been murdered in this country over the past year. The violence, rejection, and hurt, not to mention the murder experienced by transgender people, is a direct product of an anxious society threatened by lives that claim power, beauty, and meaning outside settled categories of gender norms. It is not only a moment to honor those who have died, it's a moment to reflect on only some of the cost of a violent society addicted to domination that needs to build a fence around life for the sake of its own comfort, and in so doing loses the capacity to be in relationship with the complexity, majesty, mystery, and truth of life itself. In 2009, when ORUUC voted unanimously to become a welcoming congregation, I expected that our church would become more explicitly welcoming and celebratory of people who are GLBTQ. What I didn't expect was that something else seemed to shift in that moment, and the community seemed to become more welcoming and celebratory about other aspects of everyone's lives. People seem to become freer and more honest in relating to each other, no longer requiring the conformity or unity in each other and in how we showed up. I'm sure that the Foothills UU Fellowship, whose members are here today, has had similar moments when the fellowship together chose authenticity over insisting on sameness, and chose the wilderness over creative cooperation over the grim certainty of domination. That's the way of our faith. Ideally, Unitarian Universalism is not a cul-de-sac or a bunker in which people who see things the same and live in the same way can reinforce a mutual conformity. Ideally, our faith calls us to experience and practice something a little more wild. The promise that if Christians, atheists, pagans, and others can join together in the common spirit of love without needing to convert or cajole one another, each of us would learn in our relationships with each other something of the numinous, of the majesty of life beyond any final naming or knowing. As we seek to honor the divine in one another, we invite and encourage each other to show up in complexity, in our undomesticated beauty, in our holy and irreducible mess. We invite the numinous into how we relate to each other. Practicing these kinds of relationships across a wild chasm of difference expands our capacity to fully inhabit the accurate meaning of love. The practice of those relationships builds our tolerance to relate with curiosity to what in our life is beyond our control. We come into acceptance of one another and of our authentic selves, a community committed to that path of honesty over conformity, of radical acceptance, becomes a little less brittle and more resilient as well. Our relationships across difference establish a diversity and richness of gifts and perspectives that allow us to meet a moment wisely and effectively. That's the message I hear in the story of the Bremen town musicians. On their own and seen only in the domesticated terms of their human masters, each of these four animals had reached the end of the road. They only had worth as long as they could be of use to humans. But as they traveled now, they forged a community based in diversity, one that allowed them each to be wild and distinctly themselves. And that coordination of their distinctiveness was the key to their deliverance. We hear the same message in the story of the people of God in the wilderness and the book of Exodus. We hear it in stories of indigenous people on this continent and their survival of genocide. We see it in the differentiated role of bee colonies. We see the same in the theme of the Muppet movie, where it's not one Muppet or another who can see the journey through, but different ones of them at different moments. It's the capacity of their community to call forth the diverse gifts of different ones of them to meet different moments. I think especially today of Hinduism celebrating Diwali today, the holiday at the darkest time of the year, when all over India and through Hindu households over the world, lamps are lit and a festival is declared. But amidst that unity is a wide range of local applications and traditions and different household practices. It's how Hinduism has remained strong and vibrant and resilient through the generations, its embrace of difference of particular cultures within a larger tradition. The affirmation of a common journey among vast difference. So our task is not only to embrace this diversity in our relationships, our task is to help create and uphold institutions and communities, and ultimately a whole world in which the numinous and the divine is promoted and extended, in which transgender people are finally safe from violence, and all of us know we're free to live as the beautiful ones that we have always been. This year, 2020, has not been easy in so many ways. The cases of coronavirus are spiking even higher and broader in this country than they have been before. We are asked once again and more seriously now to redouble our efforts to uphold public safety, to protect one another, and we may be exhausted. We may be on the edge with our resources depleted. It may be that we seek mostly the comfort of familiarity. In our exhaustion, the energy and alertness required of upholding and navigating diversity, of seeing things in each other as we truly are, may sometimes collapse into a need for sameness, for only relating to those who agree and to those who don't challenge our view of the world. Our spiritual lives at this point may look more like building a fenced-in pen for something domesticated than feeling able to engage the wide open world in the sometimes elusive Holy Spirit of love. Now, to take our rest as we can is a deep human need, and blessings on those who are attending to that need for rest. But as I think about the longer arc of emerging from this chapter of history, as I think about moving toward the liberation of all, each of us will be asked in the name of love to build our tolerance for what is ragged and real in ourselves and each other. Each of us will be asked to strengthen that within us, which allows us to engage in the mystery of love without insisting on sameness, without requiring that somebody else come and shrink themselves down. We're on a journey through the dark woods, not only with one another, but with the rolling wild majesty of life itself. So let us covenant, friends, with each other to be known in our truth as the wondrously strange and honest misfits we are, one to the other, not taking shortcuts or shorthands or fitting each other into the categories of the already known. Let us be real and honest and patient as gardeners. Let us risk relationships beyond what we can name and control. Let us meet one another in every person we meet, in each of our own strange beauty, affirming as we do that love across difference builds a world made to last. So may it be.
And we'd like to wrap up our worship experiences with a blessing that you can carry with you here and also take out into the week ahead. Into the week ahead. And if you're looking at the screen, you'll notice that in a moment, a bunch of here we are. If you'll join me in reading the bold words aloud, an open heart, and an open mind, and a settled spirit. May the Spirit of the living God, made known to us most fully within life's dark wood, go before you to show you the way, go above you to watch over you, go behind you to push you into places you may not necessarily go yourself, beneath you to uphold and uplift you, go beside you to be your strong and constant companion, and dwell within you to remind you you are surely not alone, and that you are loved, loved beyond your wildest imagination. And may the fire of God's blessing burn brightly upon you and within you always, now and always. Amen. And throughout the week coming ahead, we might extend gratitude and thank someone who has been a part of your misfit community, someone who has been with you throughout the dark wood of life.
When the night has come and the land is dark and the moon is the only light you see. No, I won't be afraid. No, I won't be afraid. Just as long as you stand by me. So darling, darling, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Stand by me. If the sky that we look upon should crumble and fall, and the mountain should crumble to the sea, I won't cry, I won't cry, no, I won't shed a tear, just as long as you stand by me. And darling, darling, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Stand by me. Darling, darling, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Stand by me.
As we turn from this hour, may we be fools for love and pilgrims for justice. And until we meet again, may we walk, move, and roll in beloved community. Go in peace.
And darling, darling, stand by me. stand by me, stand by